Okay, when you log onto the server today, you'll notice a couple of things that are different. Primarily, you'll notice these new icons that appear. You can arrange them to the location where you like. I just put them on top here so that we can refer to them. Mainly, we'll be talking about Enterprise Guide, but we also have the OpenCDIS 1.5 and the zip tool. You may have noticed before we've had OpenCDIS version 2, but we'll have both of them in case a client requests. We can also run the older version. And in case you're interested in learning about how to run 7-zip interactively via the GUI or as a command script, you can look at the properties and figure out where this is located here. And then you can go to that file location and actually run the command version, as in a script file. So within your SAS program, you can do an X command and zip files if you need to. I'll defer these two applications to a separate discussion, and our focus today will be on Enterprise Guide. But in general, does anyone have any questions about the new applications, and do you all see it here? Okay. Great. So if you navigate on the server to this path, the F drive, and under validation training, this is where we have some of those work instructions. I created a new PowerPoint for today's training for Enterprise Guide. So I'm going to open it now. So in the training, this is actually based upon a class that I taught at SAS Global Forum and WUS, the SAS conference. I changed some of the slides to make it fit our incline requirements. But the first thing that you may want to do is you may want, was there a question? I thought I heard something. No? Okay. In the event that you, don't have a question, you can put on mute in case there's background noise. But feel free to speak up whenever anyone has. Okay, so what I recommend is if you do plan to use Enterprise Guide often, that you can pin it to your taskbar similar to our other programs. So for example, if you were to right mouse click here, and you have the option of pinning it to your start menu or pinning it to your taskbar. So by pinning to taskbar, you see that it appears as a little icon here. That way, you can click on that and you can start it. In the event that you have other things on the screen that covers your desktop, you can start it that way. And there were some questions this morning about how to open programs, and maybe I'll address that before going into data sets quickly. Now, the way Windows work is, this is Microsoft Windows, is when you're in File Explorer, in Windows 7 they refer to this as Windows Explorer or File Manager. So this tool allows you to go through your server. So let's say you're within a study folder, and I'm sorry, let me go to a particular, not a validation, I'll go through a real study folder here. And if you were to, it could be any study, I'm just going to pick one. If you go to that folder where you have your programs, and when you double click, essentially it's clicking on this association, which is part of the Windows registry. It's a database for Microsoft Windows to associate a program with the application. Now, the registry gets updated whenever a new application is installed. In this case, last night we installed Enterprise Guide. So for a few hours when you double-click, it was going to Enterprise Guide. Upon request, users want it to default to Display Manager, so I put it back. So now when you double-click on it, it should still go back to Display Manager. But for a few moments this morning, it was registered to Enterprise Guide. Now, at any point, you can choose. If you select Open With, you can choose Notepad if you like, or you can choose a number of programs. It could be TextPad or whatever program you like. You can actually put it into EG as well by choosing your favorite app. So this is user preference, but right now, the default for the entire group, I had put it back to Display Manager since I think that's what people are used to now. But we can decide in the future, let's say in the future everyone likes EG or everyone likes TextPad or something, we can do that switch. But at the moment, it'll go to Display Manager. Does anyone have any questions about the default program association with the files ending in .sas?
Yeah, that's everything I found from the console file.
I'm sorry, can you speak up? Is that Gary? I couldn't make out.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay, I heard somebody say something. Maybe it was background noise. Okay, yeah, feel free to ask me questions. Now, this is for programs that we were talking about, but the data managers and other members, I think, will use EG for viewing data sets. One of the primary reasons that we are using this tool is our SAS Universal Viewer does not work very well in Windows 2012, SAS version 9.4. So if you were to go here to any data set, so let's say I go back here to data and I choose a data set, I believe the default after the installation will be Enterprise Guide. Yeah. So let me do that once again. Sorry, my notification you can ignore. So if I were to double click on dataset now, for example, let's say the exposure treatment dataset, notice that it jumps directly into EG now, which is a much better viewer query tool compared to other Universal Viewer and SAS Viewer. It has many more tools. But that's a default behavior now that may be different than before. Before, it may be opening to SAS Universal Viewer. Let's see, open with. Yeah, now it's going to default to EG. But you can always change that, as I mentioned before. But I hope the default dataset viewer will be what people like now, that is, using EG as a default dataset viewer. We can always change it, but that's what it is now at the moment. Any questions about the default dataset viewing, briefly? Yeah, that you can always right mouse click, open with, and choose the Universal Viewer again if you like, or any other viewer, or, mainly that's the tools that we have. Okay, since we're in the data set, I wanted to share a couple things that is different than Universal Viewer and Display Manager dataset viewer. And that is, for example, there are lots of nice key commands. I prefer using keystrokes sometimes, it's faster. Control-M is an example. So let me make the screen a little larger. Normally, your computer screen is much bigger. I'm using a little one for our meeting. But if you do Control-M, notice that the left panel here collapses. It toggles, so if I do Control-M again, it expands. Now, you can always put your mouse here and, drag, but a keystroke Control-M has a nice quick toggle to cover the entire screen for your dataset view. That's a nice feature. And, let me go up a little bit. So, there's lots of these control keys that I wanted to clarify. Control-S, you think that it would save the data set, but it's actually, in actuality, it's doing something different. Control-S let me try it now. We'll actually save the project. This is a new construct for those that never used an Enterprise Guide. The way Enterprise Guide works is that this process flow that you see on the left here actually is organized within the EGP or the project that you're currently working on. That construct doesn't really exist in Display Manager or Batch. But this could have things like in the future when you have a program that runs to produce another program, this flow diagram shows that and it organizes everything nicely. So this entire thing could be saved as a project file. Now the project file, you can save directly on the server if you like. So let's say I want to save it to the same location. Normally you save it in where your SAS program is located. So you can say something like my project, and it saves it with this extension EGP. And let's see. Oh, I currently don't have access to this working directory, but let me do it at my desktop just as a test. So let's see, where's my video desktop? Here it is. So let me call it SAS project or something like that. But basically what I wanted to describe is that if you iconize everything here, you'll see that there's this new file called SAS project here with the extension of EGP. It's the Enterprise Guide project file. Now there's some significance to this that I'll describe later, but for now I just wanted to mention the fact that the entire Enterprise Guide, the way it manages your current session, it could be saved through this process flow within the project file, an EGP file. So that's what that Control S is doing. It's not really saving the data set per se, it's saving the entire project session that could include references to the data set and programs and other things. Now, if you're working in the SAS program, the Control-Shift-S saves the program. So let's say if I have a new program. Oh, by the way, there's a couple of ways of opening a program. One, like I mentioned when we were talking about, is to navigate to your SAS program. And you can, let me see if I can find one. And then before, when we associated, it would open in EG, or you can select here in this item here, which opens in EG. Now that's one way of opening it, as you can see it's opening here. Now another way of opening a SAS program is going on this left panel down here, where basically you're expanding the local server and navigating. This looks very much like Windows Explorer here again, where you navigate to your program via this local server. Now in our environment, it doesn't make a significant difference in that you can navigate this way and get to your program, or you can navigate through Windows Explorer. Now if we have the metadata server running, which we do not have licensed, you can, opening it this way has some significant effects. But for our purpose, it's a similar way. That is, you open the, I guess I'm in the wrong folder. Let me see if I can find a study folder. So you can open a study folder here and go to a study. Let me see if I can scroll over SAS code and listing program, for example. So when you open it this way, actually, you know, Enterprise Guide does a few things. It registers your program in a slightly different way than you open it through Windows Explorer. In our case, it's very similar, but if you're running the metadata server, the full SAS BI suite, it registers a lot more things within the metadata server. In our case, we don't have that. So it's similar in the both ways that you open these programs. Does anyone have any questions about these two methods of opening a SAS program within EG?
I have a question.
Yeah, was that Barry?
So what about saving, output and logs? Is save DMS going to work? I mean, how
That's a
does
good
that?
question. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think Barry is asking, what happens when we run this and we have a log and a list output type files? How does it save that? Let me run an example. I won't run this program because maybe this is someone's current work. Let me do a new generic one. So let's say you have a program that does a print, some kind of proc report or proc print of some data. Let's say SAS. Another thing to mention, there's a lot of syntax support in EG that Display Manager does not have. So it helps you fill in dataset names and things like that, and proc syntax very nicely. So let's say I run this, and you can run it using clicking this running man here, or you can hit F8. This is similar to F3, which you may be familiar with in Display Manager. You can also run part of the code by selecting the section similar to Display Manager. But let me just run it, the whole program. It's a very short program. So right now, when I run this, it produces this output file, and it produces this log file. Now, it does not save it in any particular folder directory. So when you run in batch, let's say if I right mouse click and run it this way, I won't do it in case I miss someone's work. But if I were to run it this way, it would produce a log and list file here in this directory. When I run it in in EG, it does not. It shows you here in these windows, 2 tabs, but it does not save it physically on the file system. So Barry's question is, how do you save this? There's a couple of ways. One is you can manually, of course, save it by going here and, clicking on saving it this way. This is kind of clunky in that you don't want to do it every time. Another automated way, since we're here, actually it's a topic I think I have further down. I'll just mention it briefly now, and then when we get down to that part, I'll describe in detail. But there's a way that you can automate it that essentially is under the Tools options, under the program here, and the program options. Let's see. You can add custom code logic. Every time you run a program, it would run your little snippet. So one approach that a lot of users do is to add a little proc print to right in here, and I'll show you that later. And it would automatically redirect or save this log file into your study folder with your program name, and in a similar way, LST in the output file. I'll get into that a little bit in detail in the later slide, but in general, does that answer your question, Barry, in terms of how you would save log and output files?
Hey, Cy, this is Gary.
Yeah.
I want to just address that just a little bit. But Barry, our current setup and redirect macros not work with EG right now. We have to make some changes to get them to work correctly. So your normal programming that we're doing right now is going to produce errors when you run it in an EG, just because of those things. And so I expect to probably get that worked out pretty shortly, but I just haven't had time to do it yet. So EG is not going to be good for us to write programs and run programs until after we get those set up and redirect utilities fixed.
Right, because I don't think the I don't think that because the macro variables that you use and set up, I don't think are available in EJ.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Barry makes a good point in that I'll jump to that slide 40 that talks about that custom code. You know how I mentioned about that custom code that you can set here? once you click Edit, you can insert custom code. In EG, it has a different set of macro variables. For example, the macro variable _SAS program file. This contains both the path and the program file that you're currently opening. And then this piece of logic will then, create a log and list file that it will then do the proc print to. So this is very different than the current setup.SAS that Gary's referring to. Display Manager and Batch uses a different macro variable. So you're right, Gary's in the process of updating the piece of logic that if it's in EG, it'll do something different like this. And if it's in Display Manager or Batch, it would use a different set of macro variables. So they are two different environments, and they use different macro variables. So that's something to be aware of. And like for example, this proc print to logic that I have for EG would work only when you're in EG because it's looking for these particular macro variables, program name and username and user ID and things like that. This doesn't exist in Display Manager or Batch. So yeah, in general, you have to approaches. The setup.SAS has to function differently. We can talk more about that later. Gary's still in the process of updating that script. I guess we just keep in mind that they work differently, different set of macro variables. So back to the program, if you were to save the program, you can of course do like a file save as type thing, or you can click on this menu save as, or you can do the menu Control Shift S. It's the same thing as saving your files. And continue down. I like these little shortcuts. It helps. But one thing I wanted to explain is the tighter integration with the Windows environment. For example, so let's say you're in viewing a data set that we were looking at here. In the past, in Display Manager, it's difficult to move this into Excel. In this case, you can easily export it. So you see this little export menu. You can then decide to export this. And there are several different file formats. You can export it into Excel, a CSV file, a tab delimited file. So it's built right in. It's kind of nice in that if I were to export this, save it, it creates, I think I did it into my desktop so that I iconize things. I can see that there's this new Excel file that contains, that data set. So it tries to use whatever format it can to do certain conversions, but these are the types of integration that data managers may find useful in integrating. Another thing which I'll show you later, I may have shown you in a previous meeting, is that you can copy a section, for example, and you can go back to Excel, and you can then, even in a new tab, paste it. So basically, I pasted values that was in a data set where, if I do this in Display Manager or Universal Viewer, it would be difficult to do. But those are some nice enhancements within the integration of the data set and other parts of EG directly into Microsoft Windows. Those are nice things. I should mention that this is an outstanding one. I'm currently looking into setting up our printers. I noticed that in our printer environment, there's some additional configuration in that. Let's see if I can, I guess you have to set up your local printers. Everyone will be a little different, but you can print this. If you leave it as PDF, it'll create a PDF file. But it functions very similar to any other Windows application, where you can print directly from SAS in the similar way that you can do in EG here. Continue here. A couple other nice things. This is a very universal thing that you do, but I wanted to just explain. If you want to search for a value, if you do Control F, the default is column only, meaning you're only searching for items in this column. But if you want to search the entire data set, you would have to change the default to the whole table. So if I were to search for the word none, and notice that I'm currently in the study and it's over here, when I click Find Next, it jumps here. But sometimes people leave it the column only, and they're only searching for that column and might not find it in the data set. That's a simple search. Now, there's query tools that I'll talk about in a little bit, but a Control F is a simple way of searching for things. Another thing to look at is the whole process flow over here on the left, and it's actually hidden in the back. But if you hear an EG and you hit F4, it will show you the kind of the visual process flow in the back. If you were to hit F4 again, it toggles back and forth. But this is useful when you have a program that runs that produces maybe a data set that maybe another program reads. So it has that nice flow diagram for you. In our case, it's just a simple program that produces an output. No big deal. But F4 is a useful toggle to jump between those screens. Another useful one I mentioned earlier is how to run a program. Now, F3 is the common one for what you use in Display Manager. In EG is F8. So if you have a program and if you hit F8, it's similar to clicking on this Run button. The menu also has this option, as I mentioned, Run Selection, which means that if you only want to run, these set of 3 lines of code, you can do Run Selection. But if you hit F8, it will run, the entire program. So that shows the running of the program. Some of these are very fundamental. Hopefully it's not too much of a beginner thing. But one thing that's interesting is to do macros. Now, some people, let me explain to you what a macro is. It's not a SAS macro per se. It's a macro to do a sequence of keys. So if you go here, you can do the control keys, but I can show you the menu as well. It's under Editor, Control-Shift-R, it starts a macro. So let's say, notice my icon mouse changes to this little tape recorder. So let's say my macro just adds a comment here. Actually, you could do a macro to do more advanced things, but that's a simple macro. And then when you're finished, you can say macro stop. And then you can give it some name. So it could be to insert a comment. And then you can assign it to a key, like, for example, Control A or something like that. Let's see. Control A. Whatever key you press, it'll program to that key. So once you assign that, now when I hit Control A, it runs that macro. Now, the macro could be writing a project, data step logic or some other things. I just want to show you the ability to record a macro. If you use TextPad or Notepad or other editors have very sophisticated macro recording. EG has some basic macros as well. Does anyone have any questions about some of the features so far with macros and some of the shortcut commands? They're pretty basic, huh? F1 is for help. A useful thing is to jump to a line number. In Display Manager, some of the old use of Display Manager, the number line shows on the left and you can get to things. But in this case, if you do Control G, that's Control G, you can jump to line, how about 30 or something like that. So this kind of jumps down to a specific line number. So it could be a useful thing if you have a long program to jump to a particular line number. I'll go through some of these rather quickly because they're pretty basic. So you can also comment a whole section of code by doing Control/. So here's an example where if I have a program and I want to comment this out, I can do Control/. Notice it inserts the /* comment for me. Control-Z is an undo, so you can undo it. But if you do Control/ multiple times, like I do it 2 times here, notice that it keeps compounding my comments, which doesn't really make sense. But I do Control-Z to put it back. That's a nice tool to quickly comment out your code. You don't have to, manually do that by hand. So you can uppercase and lowercase, Control-Shift-U and L. So, for example, if you want this text to be all uppercase, Control-Shift-U, notice it uppercase, and Control-Shift-L, lowercase. So those are common text editor type features. Maybe the key mappings is different on your previous editors, but in the EG, it's Control-Shift-U, and then Control-Shift-L for lowercase, upper and lowercase, the entire text. So that's pretty basic. Another useful tool is an AutoIndent, and this is very SAS specific. So I won't mess up this program, but let's say I have a program here, and I have some data set that sometimes people write that they string it all along, so they have it in one line. So you can set some data set here, and then you run it. So this is a common programming style for those that are not structured. They put it in one line. But if you do Control-I, it will automatically indent it for you. Notice that it automatically put this on the next line and it indents it. So it makes it easier to read. And it does it for the entire program. So if you have a messy program, you can do Control-I, and it would reformat your entire program to the standard indentation. As a useful tool. Everyone can read consistently. Does anyone have any questions about what Control-I does with AutoIndent? One thing to note is that we're in version 7.1 in Enterprise Guide. This feature started in version 4.3. When I taught this class, some people had older versions of each, and it didn't have this feature. But our version is way beyond version 7 now, so we're on the cutting edge now of the latest release. Another useful thing is in the log. I'll show you on using Control-E. But if you're programming and you have some errors here, so that I'll introduce some errors here. So that's not a real SAS code. If I were to run it, one thing to note is that's different than Display Manager. Notice that when I run, it says, do you want to replace the result? A thing I want to describe is that the program that I'm running here has its own log and its own lists and related files. And if I were to run another program, like a listing program, it has its own log and list as well. In Display Manager, it intertwines them. It kind of commingles your various programs into a single log and single list, so it gets very confusing. This one, it keeps it as a separate thread. It's similar to batch in that when you're in batch mode, when you run a batch program, each log and each list has its own file. It's analogous in that when you run EG, each log and each output, it keeps it in its own separate thread. So it doesn't commingle and mix them similar to Display Manager. So that's why when I run it again, it says, do you want to replace? It replaces the log and list for this program, not the other ones. Just as a side note, it keeps it separate nicely. So let's say you have a program here, and you want it to find the error message, and maybe this is very long. If I do Control-E, oh, was there a question? I thought I heard somebody. Okay, maybe not. Notice that it jumps from the very top down to this line here where it finds the error. So if you have a very long program and you don't know where your error messages are, you can do Control E. Now that's similar to these two buttons here. Now these two buttons will jump to the next warning or error message. So if I click it again, it'll keep going to the next one and so forth. Or I can jump back and go back up again. So this is a nice little navigational tool, equivalent or similar to Control E, that allows you to jump directly to where your, it's not necessarily error, it also includes warning type messages. So if you have a warning problem, a problem code segment in your log, it can jump directly there. Any questions about log review using control keys and arrows? Yeah, pretty basic, but I think it's a useful tool. People use that a lot. One other construct that people may not be familiar with is that this entire process flow, organizes your programs and data sets that we were seeing here. But you can create multiple process flow within your one single project file. For example, I'll show you. If you were to go File, New, Process Flow, notice that I have a new process flow here, and I can have its own little programs and data sets, and separate than this process flow. So the construct is that you can create multiple process flows, maybe one for listing type programs and one for summary table type programs. It's up to you, but you can have multiple of these in one project file. Okay, so let's say you're a data manager, or even if you're writing a program and you want to query a data set. There are lots of features for this, and filter is a common one. This is mainly designed for non-SAS programmers, and they do not want to write code. They can apply compound expressions, meaning and, or, if, then type things. And I'll show you an example. So let's say I'm looking at this data set, and I want to make a filter. To do that, you click on this filter button here. And the final result, you can decide what variables you want to show. And then you click on the filter, and you can say, how about, let me see what's a good filter. How about the dose is MG. Maybe that's everything, I'm not sure. But let's say the dose, which is CM dose U, is, you can do like in a list. And this is nice in that, let me bring it up. You can say, find all the distinct values. I'm sorry, I scrolled it down so it's a little hard to see. But notice that it brings up a distinct list here. This is kind of like a proc SQL select distinct or a proc or no dupe type thing. You can find all the distinct values for that dose, and you can add the ones that you want, and then you can say OK. And in essence, it's going to write a little SAS program that generates a new work area data set that subsets to that condition. So this is a simple filter. You can do much more sophisticated filters with and or type logic. But it's really powerful for those data managers that don't want to write a whole bunch of SAS code, that this is a useful tool for that. I just want to mention what it's actually doing in that if I go to my process flow, notice that my original data set here, in essence, it created a little SAS program, if you will, applying that logic, and then it creates a work area data set. For those of you that are familiar with the lib names here, if you go to the lib, these are your SAS library names into the work area, you notice it created a new work area data set called a filter for CM. But in essence, the filter is actually like applying a little SAS logic, and then you have a new data set that's the result, which is a work area data set. So those filtering tools, it is a course in itself. There could be a whole class on creating lots of sophisticated filters. What I've shown was a very simple one. You can even go to the query builder here and create more sophisticated sorts and joins and many other things. So I just wanted to briefly mention its capabilities, and if you wanted to explore that, it's a much more robust querying tool compared to our universal viewer or other tools that we have had in the past. Any general questions about the filtering and querying capabilities of EG? Yeah, I think it's worth exploring more for those data managers or programmers that want to use this as a quick way of getting to values. I just wanted to introduce you to those ideas. If we were to plan to use this process flow and to organize, let's say, a whole bunch of programs that generate listings, for example, you can insert notes, comment notes. And what I mean is a comment is similar to a SAS program when you add a comment at the top of your program with asterisks. You can do this through a note. And I'll show you if you go into File, New, Note. Whoops. You can say test note here. Let me go back to the flow diagram. So it shows up as you can think of it like a yellow sticky. So you can add a note associated with the data set or any of the notes. But in essence, it's just text. So like a comment field, you can associate objects with in English explaining what that means or what that part of the process is. So this is good documentation if you want to add additional notes as an option to make your process more clear and understandable.
Okay, so that note, that's actually kept in the project file?
That's right. If you were to save this, like we were talking about earlier, save this project, it stores everything. In my case, I saved it to my desktop. Let me go back to my desktop here. It saves it to this EGP file. Let's see where to go. This file right here. But you're right, everything is encapsulated into this project file. The extension is EGP. Normally, you would save this in the directory where your program is. I'm not working on this study, and I don't have access, so I saved it here. But you're right, all these process flow and notes and things are saved here in this EGP file. In fact, there's other things too, which I'll describe in a second that's important, but yeah, currently that's so far what we've discussed is saved it there. A nice thing too is this this works best when you have a large screen. My screen is kind of small, but a lot of times users, when they're doing their program, they may be looking at a program code in one screen, and they want to look at their data set at the same time to do their programming. You can split them vertically or horizontally here. Notice now I have two screens, and you can then view your data sets. The thing to note is that when you click here, it says that the next thing I'm going to open will be displayed here. So I can open the data set, and you can have your data set viewed here and then your programming here. So you can view it both at the same time. That's a useful tool. People do that a lot. They sometimes even view two data sets at the same time. But this split view, either horizontally or vertically, is a common development environment tool that you can use to view your data at the same time that you're programming. There's a couple of related things that I'll mention here in that. Let me view it horizontally. My screen is so small. Let's say you're programming and you want to see the content, the attributes of these. It may be later in the slides. Since I'm here, I'll describe. You can click on this properties. I did kind of quickly, this little icon here, and it brings up my columns, and these are like all the variables and their attributes. You can copy this to a clipboard, and then you can go to, for example, Excel or something, and then you can paste this. So a common useful thing is a programmer can be working on their program, and when they want to know a particular variable attribute, they can switch over to their Excel and say, oh, okay, it's a character, and length 40 and whatever is needed. So that's a useful tool to look at the variable attributes, and that's all available here under the. Another thing to note is if you look at the data set attribute here, notice that it shows the date time to your modified and created date. A common thing that users do is they can actually copy this, meaning they select it, and then you can copy this text value, and then if you have a data set with a field that says, when was this modified, and you want to record it, shoot, I don't want to alter this data set. Let me go into this example one. If I mess up someone's data, I'll be in trouble. So what I wanted to say is that you can go inside and put this in edit mode. When I double click, it says, are you sure you want to edit? Say yes. And then you can actually paste the value of course, you have to have your formats, matching the date time. But the construct here is that the attribute of that data set, in this case, the date and time, I'll go back to show you once again. This attribute here is text that you can copy, and then you can paste directly, if you like, into the data set itself or into any other document. So if you're wanting to document when was this data set created and modified, you can easily do that through this modified date here that you can actually copy. Any questions about data set attributes and how you can access them and copy and paste and even edit a data set? One thing I want to mention since we're here is that even when you open a data set, it locks this data set. In my case, it's just a work area, so it's no big deal. But let's say I'm looking at the CM data set here, and another programmer is wanting to update that. When I'm looking at it, I'm actually locking this data set. People cannot update this data set at this time. What you can do is click on the Edit menu, and then you go into Protect Data. In fact, I did that. It toggles, so I don't think I have permission to do it anyways. But if you were to unprotect it, you're basically releasing it when you do protect mode. You're only viewing it as a read-only. So when you open your data set and you set the protect data flag, what that means is that you're only in view mode now, and other people can update it. You're basically releasing the lock on that data set. So it's good practice to do when you're viewing a data set that you know other people are potentially using it. You can edit, protect. That way, you're basically releasing the lock so that other users can work on it at the same time. Any questions about data set locking and protect mode? I'm jumping a little bit. Those slides are further down, but I was there, so I thought I'd describe that process. I described the split view, horizontal and vertical, which is nice. Another thing is when you're running your program, there's a status at the bottom. Let me show you. So right now, the view doesn't show me any status, but if I were to go to view status bar here, notice it gives me a little screen at the bottom. And what that status does is, let me close down my view so I can see. If I'm running this program, notice that it shows me that the program's running, and it shows me the exact data set. It happened pretty quickly, so you didn't see it, but it shows the fact that the program was running, what data set was running, and then when it finished, it's completed. So for a long program that's running and you're not sure if it's caught in an infinite loop or crashing, you can have the status to show you what's happening to that session. You can also look at the log summary that describes any specific error. This is new to version 7. I think the previous version didn't have this nice detail. It's like a summary of what's happened. Instead of looking at the entire log, you can summarize how many errors and warnings there were. It's a nice thing to have. So the status is useful for long jobs. Go down a little bit. I talked about protect data sets already. Another thing to note is that your profile, right now we're running everything locally. We don't need a profile. This is only if we have purchased the SAS metadata server, the full BI suite. In that case, you can create a profile connecting to the SAS application server. In our case, what we're doing is we're running this without any profile. And when we submit a program, it's running the SAS process on the server directly using the base foundation SAS engine. So everything is considered local. So there's no such profile. Profile is reserved for when we purchase the BI suite with the metadata server. You can ignore this for now, but if you see other EG, you may have profiles in other environments. In our case, we don't use this. Any questions about profiles and we're not using it? Not to be using it. I want to mention that if you have another environment, you'll probably see a profile. I did mention this already, but there's this construct of adding custom code into every session. In this case, you can insert a little data set that captures the program name so that you can automatically save your SAS program log and output each time you run. Let me review that briefly. So let's say you're here and you go to Tools, Options. In fact, this is where a lot of different options reside. If you go to Programs, you can go to the Editor options and define that the default should be 3 spaces and not tabs. This might be a good convention. So once the team standardizes, so let's say Gary says, this is the way we should do it. Everyone's program should be indented by 3 spaces and not 4. And you need to change it here. And each time you do that Control-I that I mentioned, it will organize your code in the standard indentation with spaces and not tabs. But the thing I was describing is if you want to insert program code logic, you can add your program here. What this does is it will capture, the program name and generate the log and the list for you, similar to that. If you want the sample logic, I suggest just copy and paste this from the slide into your session. So when I do this, it would automatically capture the current program you're working on, assign it to these macro variables, which it will use to do the proc print to. So this is the type of thing that you would do if you want to automatically save each time you run. So once I have this, for example, if I do it both to the beginning and the end, when I run it, when I click on run, it would run my little proc print to logic, and it'll close it out at the end of the program, and the log will be saved directly into my specific study folder. It knows where that program was saved, and it picks up the right program name to save the log and the list. Does anyone have any questions about how to automatically save your log and list using that approach? Okay, there's this nice feature that is brand new, meaning it didn't even exist in the previous version of, so this is part of the logic. If you were to look at it, saving the log, basically does a proc print to, or it does a data step to capture that. But I wanted to show you, I already talked about this with the capturing of the metadata, the date modified. I wanted to describe change control a little bit, and this is a decision that we should decide whether we want to use or not. It's nothing that is set in stone yet. But before we can do change control, there's a distinction between what's considered an external file and what's an embedded file in a project. Notice that if you look closely, these two, one has a little shortcut link and one does not. Let me show you what the difference is. So notice that in my programs, in fact, in this one, you can kind of see it. It's a little small. You see how these two programs, if you look at the icon, it has a little, like a shortcut link to it, little square thing there. But in this program, there's no such thing. This program was created brand new and it's embedded, meaning it resides inside the project. Whereas this program, I physically, went to the directory, and I can do it here, or I actually went to Windows Explorer and I opened it. So when you open it externally or through this left server list here, it's considered an external file, meaning it exists in the file system. When you create a new program here, it's considered an embedded file, meaning it's embedded inside the EG project. That project file, I'll mention again real brief. That project file that we have saved out as a physical EGP file. Now this program that I'm developing here is actually inside this EGP file. It doesn't quite yet exist physically out there in the F drive yet. So the distinction is that embedded files, you have the ability to do change control. And I'll show you what I mean by that. You cannot apply this, by the way, fully with external files. There's some configuration that we'll work on, but fully embedded files have the full functionality of change control. So what I mean by change control is, so let's say I'm writing a program, and this is a good version. I can click on this commit here, and it says, okay, this is a good stopping version. It captures this version. I say this is the first version of ready for testing or something like that. It's just a little description. And I committed this program. Let's say someone else comes in and they add more logic here. And then they commit their version. It could be you the following day. I added new logic here, and I commit that. We actually have two versions now. So if you look at the history, you can actually see that there's two different versions of your program. One is before the logic, and one is, the first one has no logic. The second one has this logic. And in fact, if you select both of them, you can do a compare. One thing that we haven't yet configured, there's many comparison tools, visual ones, that will put the program side by side with color coding and all that. But we have to register that. That's something that I'll have to do in the coming weeks. But this nice feature of version control and looking at the history and comparing old files and even restoring an old version through this revert button, it's fully inside EG, which is something new. The difference, however, is that that entire series of old program logic, the different versions, is stored in this project file. It's not stored externally as, your SAS program version 1, version 2. There's no physical separate files. All their versions are in this project file. So if you were to do batch or display manager, you can't really get to it. It's its own little thing. So we have to decide as a team leader if that's value add that we want to use. We can use that, or we want it to play with the physical files. But at least that feature now exists in EG, that whole version control capability. The only distinction is that it only works a lot well with embedded files inside the project, and it's not intended to version control physical files, what they call external files in the operating system. Does anyone have any questions about that's mainly the last thing I wanted to talk about today, is the versioning of programs as an option in EG and how it's managed within the EGP Enterprise Guide project file, not physical files.
That's interesting, Sai. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, there's lots of interesting things with EG, I think. As a general approach, SAS is putting all their resources into Enterprise Guide. All these new features, everything from the dataset query tool to the versioning of programs to all these things are constantly being enhanced in Enterprise Guide, and very little effort SAS is putting into Display Manager. Display Manager looks the same that it did, 5-10 years ago, and EG is constantly being enhanced. Not to say that's good or bad. I'm just stating the reality of the direction of SAS Institute. So we can invest time in learning and doing things in EG, or we can, keep using Batch and Display Manager. The difference is that new things will only be developed here in EG, and I see very little things from a development and enhancement standpoint happening in the Batch and Display Manager part of SAS.
Hey, Sai, on that version control stuff, if you did all your development in the EG and all that stuff is actually saved in the EG project file, I'm assuming that there's a way to export those programs into physical external files?
There is. In fact, not automatically, but one idea some team members that I work with in the past is that piece of logic that I described earlier, where you go into tools and options and then you go into your program, you can insert little piece of logic that each time you run, even though it's versioning inside your project file, it's actually saving at the same time, physically outside as well. So there's ways of getting it out, either automatically each time you run, or you can go here and then save it as and put it outside. But by default, it saves it all in here in this project file. So you have to do some intervention if you want it to then move that out to a separate file. There's some danger too in that it encapsulates all of your versions. So let's say you have, your hundreds of programs in this folder, all versioned within this one EGP file. And if someone were to delete that file, in that directory, you basically lost the history and all your programs in one swoop. So a common practice too is, maybe another script that backs up this EGP file, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. In other words, in that all your versions and all your logic, instead of spread out, it's all in one file. And there could be some danger, risk associated with that. You can mitigate by working around, but yeah, you're right. Everything is stored here. All your flow diagrams, all the notes, the things that we talked about, and all the versions, it's all in this one file.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering about client delivery. If they want programs to actually be delivered, then there's got to be some way to get them out of there. So.
Yeah, that's right. There's value added when you adding the features of the process flow and the version control. But you're right, it's locked into the EG environment. So if the users are not using EG, they wouldn't. You can of course send them this file. If they have EG, they can open it up and use it. But if they do not have the EG, then yeah, you do need to export that into separate files. Since this is more universal, a text file. Okay, so those are the main things I wanted to share with you today. Is that version control and history view. Were there any last remaining questions before we close out? Great, well thanks a lot. Feel free to email me as you're using these EG tools, either as a viewer or as a programming environment. Any questions, I'll be glad to help and expand on solutions. Some of these I put in the YouTube video in the past, so if you surf YouTube, you might see the same online. Hopefully this is useful today.
Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you, Sai.
Great,
Thank
thanks.
you.
So have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk to
Thank
you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.